of Prime Minister Modi meeting with Vladimir Putin. Prime Minister Modi is in Russia for the BRICS Summit.
Один из наших исторически замечательных городов в Поволжье. Я с теплотой вспоминаю ваш июльский визит в Москву и плодотворные переговоры с вами. Мы регулярно обмениваемся информацией по телефону. Признателен, что вы откликнулись на наше приглашение и лично приехали в Казань на саммит БРИКС. Сегодня мы вместе примем участие в церемонии открытия саммита. Затем предстоит общение лидеров за ужином. И таким образом мы начнем уже нашу работу. В Казани мы должны принять целый ряд важных решений, направленных на дальнейшее совершенствование деятельности объединения и укрепление в Казань на саммит БРИКС. Сегодня мы вместе примем участие в церемонии открытия саммита.
Right, there you can see Russian President Vladimir Putin, welcoming everyone for the 16th BRICS Summit. The Prime Minister arrived earlier today in Kazan for the meet, and he is expected to hold bilateral meetings also with the Russian President. And of more interest is also with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also there for the summit. So meetings expected on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. This comes a day after that breakthrough between India and China over the LAC in Ladakh. So that was the big breakthrough, a thawing really, and a big step towards disengagement by both sides. So now the Prime Minister in Russia and expected to hold a meeting with Xi Jinping on the sidelines. Now, this is a two-day summit. The theme is strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security. This will provide an important platform for leaders to discuss key global issues, which is what President Putin is probably laying there on the table, talking about the key thrusts and the key priorities for the groupings. This is the first summit of the group following its expansion last year. Let's go across to Vishnu for more. And Vishnu, first and foremost, tell us more about this 16th BRICS Summit and what is expected there. Obviously, a lot of interest and attention on the possible bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping.
Well, I think that's the only point of interest over here in India. The BRICS, a very, very important international forum set up by Brazil, Russia, India and China. But given the fact that there have been so many tensions for the last 4 years between India and China, really the focus this time around at BRICS is whether there will be more that we hear about the resolution on the line of actual control conflict between India and China, which follows what we've heard from India's Foreign Secretary, India's Foreign Minister, and now we've heard statements from the Chinese Foreign Ministry as well. India says that that India and China have agreed to India restarting patrolling along the line of actual control to positions which we used to patrol prior to the Galwan crisis. If that does take place, then it does mark a de-escalation in the truest sense of the word. That's what India has always wanted. But we do hope to get more detail from the China side as well. And we do expect there to be a meeting between Prime Minister Modi in Kazan with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. There are a couple of opportunities today and tomorrow when there is a possibility of that meeting taking place. I think it's fair to say that a meeting will happen after the Galwan crisis of 2020, in which several Indian soldiers were killed in action in violent skirmishes with Chinese soldiers. Several Chinese soldiers were also killed. There have been only two previous occasions when Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi have met. Those were very brief affairs. But this time around, if there is a proper bilateral talk that takes place, then it certainly does add impetus to the process of confidence building between the two sides and the actual implementation of the agreement that has been arrived at on the ground.
The key thing that we're all looking out for. It's been 4 years since the Galwan clashes and, the relationship and the tensions between India and China. And it's been a lot of diplomacy at play. Finally, a series of meetings that have taken place regarding the line of actual control. And finally, yesterday, that big breakthrough, very timely.
कि ब्रिक्स समिट के लिए कजान जैसे खूबसूरत शहर में आने का अवसर मिला है। इस शहर के साथ भारत के गहरे और ऐतिहासिक संबंध रहे हैं। कजान में भारत के नए कॉन्सुलेट के खुलने से ये संबंध और मजबूत होंगे।
Ваше Превосходительство, в первую очередь позвольте от всей души поблагодарить вас за вашу дружбу, за теплое и радушное гостеприимство. Отрадно, что мне посчастливилось, что я приехал в Казань, в такой прекрасный город, для того, чтобы участвовать в саммите БРИКС. Индия имеет глубокие исторические связи с этим городом. И после того, как откроется генконсульство Индии, в этом городе наши отношения еще крепнут.
एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 3 महीनों में मेरा 2 बार रूस आना हमारे करीबी समन्वय और गहरी मित्रता को दर्शाता है। जुलाई में मॉस्को में हुई हमारी एनुअल समिट से हर क्षेत्र में हमारे सहयोग को बल मिला है।
Ваше Превосходительство, это мой второй визит в Россию за последние 3 месяца, и это свидетельствует о тесной координации и крепкой дружбе между нашими странами. В июле в Москве, как вы правильно упомянули, мы провели двусторонний саммит, и благодаря нашим дискуссиям наше сотрудничество во всех областях укрепилось.
एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 1 वर्ष में ब्रिक्स की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बधाई देता हूँ। 15 वर्षों में ब्रिक्स ने अपनी एक विशेष पहचान बनाई है और अब विश्व के अनेक देश इससे जुड़ना चाहते हैं। कल मैं ब्रिक्स समिट में भाग लेने के लिए उत्सुक हूँ।
Ваше Превосходительство, вы успешно руководите объединением БРИКС с начала года. За это я хотел бы вас поздравить. За последние 15 лет своего существования наше объединение БРИКС создало для себя особую личность, и сегодня многие страны мира хотят присоединиться к нашему объединению. Я с нетерпением жду наших дискуссий в рамках БРИКС завтра.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है। एक्सेलेंसी, आज इन सभी विषयों पर विचार साझा करने का एक और महत्वपूर्ण अवसर है। एक बार फिर बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Ваше Превосходительство, по поводу продолжающегося конфликта между Россией и Украиной мы регулярно находимся в контакте. Как я сказал и раньше, мы считаем, что проблемы должны решаться мирными способами, и мы полностью поддерживаем скорейшее установление мира и стабильности. Во всех наших усилиях мы даем приоритетное значение человечеству, и мы готовы оказать любое возможное содействие и в будущем. Ваше Превосходительство, сегодня у нас будет возможность поговорить по всем этим вопросам. Еще раз хотел бы вас поблагодарить.
Спасибо.
All right, so that is the bilateral taking place, the Prime Minister meeting with Russian President Putin and also talking about the relationship between both countries, saying it's his second visit in the last few months to Russia in 2 months' time. Also talking about how they've been in touch over the situation in Ukraine. Let's go across to Kadambani, who joins us from there. Kadambani, so the first bilateral there taking place, and the Prime Minister speaking about Ukraine as he was welcomed by President Putin.
Yes, of course, President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are meeting at the Kremlin here and Kremlin Kazan here. And during the opening statements, while President Putin welcomed and thanked PM Modi for coming to Kazan for BRICS. So PM Modi, as expected, he has said that they will be talking about the conflict here. He has said that we have been in touch the last few months about this conflict, and he has also stressed again that only way forward is the peaceful way. There should be talk and there should be a proper shantipurna tarike se hona chahiye. That is what he has said, and that is what he said they'll be also talking about in the bilateral which has just started. So as expected, not only the bilateral relation with Russia is on the table, but also the issue, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is also something which both the leaders will talk about. And PM has said that earlier as well. He talked about this when he was here on his previous visit. Then he also said the same thing when he went to Ukraine. He visited Ukraine. He also said that युद्ध के मैदान में ये सुलझे नहीं जाते इस तरह की चीजें. So this cannot be done in the battleground. So he is pushing continuously for talks and for peaceful resolution of what is happening at the Russia-Ukraine borders.
That's right. And now the bilateral taking place. What more can we expect from there? What are we expecting during this meeting?
Well, I have talked to several of my sources, and they are saying that while they cannot predict what will happen in the meeting, but of course there are other aspects of talks, because you heard the President Putin say that it is a strategic relationship. Of course, it's a strategic relationship, and given the situation, the geopolitical situation now, it's even more strategic at the moment. We know how there are so many sanctions on Russia, and how India has stood its ground as far as oil is concerned. So there would be talks about energy. There would be talks about, we are hearing about sea routes, North Sea routes, and we are also hearing about other uses of the Arctic here and in Russia's within borders. So there are other issues as well. So there would be talks about several topics, as India and Russia's relationship has a very vast gamut. So this is all which would be talked. But of course, what people would be watching, what other countries would be watching, of course, what comes out of it on Russia and Ukraine, what PM Modi has said to President Putin, and what President Putin has replied, if it comes out at all.
All right, Kadamni, we also have Vishnu with us. And Vishnu, I was just going to pose that question to you about how the world will be watching this very closely. These talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, talks about Ukraine, and it comes at and as we've seen over the last couple of years, the world has been quite hostile to Russia, and India has been that one friend. So that has been watched very closely.
Well, I was in Ukraine recently, and there is certainly a huge Indian effort as far as trying to reach out to the Ukrainian leadership, a huge Indian effort in terms of reaching out to the Russian leadership. We've conveyed messages from Ukraine to Russia and vice versa. India hasn't gone to Ukraine or gone to Russia saying that, look, this is what the solution is to the crisis between the two countries, but we are here to facilitate anything that works between both of you. At the same time, what is important and what the Prime Minister has repeatedly said is that the sovereignty of all nations, according to UN principles, needs to be maintained, needs to be ensured, and therefore the territorial sanctity of Ukraine is something that India backs, while making the point that there needs to be a peaceful solution, a diplomatic solution to the crisis between the two countries. I should add that in as much as Ukraine and Russia and the war over there, which has claimed tens of thousands of lives on either side, is absolutely critical, the focus of India, and I dare say China as well, would be on that agreement between India and China, which was arrived at and announced yesterday, on the resumption of Indian patrolling rights in the line of actual control in Ladakh. That's 4 years after the Galwan clashes, the biggest breakthrough in ties between India and China in the last 4 years. President Xi and Prime Minister Modi are likely to meet. When that meeting does take place, we would perhaps get more details on the nature of this breakthrough. One can only hope that it is lasting, it is not ephemeral, it does result in genuine confidence-building measures, and works towards a resumption of the true potential of the relationship between Beijing and New Delhi. I can tell you also that India is being cautious and optimistic at the same time, but nobody is getting ahead of themselves.
That's right. And Kadamni, that is the other big thing, everybody's watching out for, especially here. A lot of, we're all waiting to see whether indeed that bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping takes place. And as Vishnu said, it comes a day after that big breakthrough in disengagement along the LAC.
Well, of course, Gargi, this is something which has a very strong possibility after yesterday's announcement. There is an expectation that there will be a bilateral between PM Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. He also arrived today here just after PM Modi did. So this would be something which we would, of course, be looking at very keenly, because after 4 years, there is a breakthrough. There had been constant conversations between the two countries at the diplomatic level as well as the military level. But the final breakthrough seemed very far off, and finally, when it has happened, it has been just before BRICS Summit. So the expectations are that both the countries, both the sides, the PM Modi and Xi Jinping, would be talking here, and more details about how this final stage of disengagement is going to play out. And after that, what is the next step forward? As Vishnu has said, that India is also being quite cautious, so and rightly so. So India would be cautious, but of course, the world would like to see, several countries would like to see, even Russia would like to see that this situation between India and China is resolved, because both are powers in their own right in the region and of course the world.
That's right. And Kadamni, just for viewers, what else is expected at the BRICS Summit? There will be a Kazan declaration.
Well, of course, today the leaders have arrived. There would be a Kazan declaration tomorrow after the summit takes place. And as you know, this is the first summit where the new 5 members would also be joining. There would be a formal inclusion of them, and they would be here. There would be a BRICS declaration, which might also talk about BRICS currency. It has been going on for some years, but it hasn't actually taken shape because there are so many technical issues in that, and how it is going to work. But one thing which has been said about the BRICS by PM Modi and also repeated by President Putin is that this BRICS grouping is not against any other group, not against anyone, but a different one. So this is something which is being stressed about. But of course, as far as multilateral meetings go, this is an important one, because this is one multilateral forum where you wouldn't see Western nations. There are Central Asian nations, there are African nations, there is Asia, but there are like, if you look at Western nations, they have a different grouping. G20 is there, G7 is there, but this is something different. And it has, with the inclusion of 5 new members, it is emerging even stronger as far as economics is concerned.
All right. So there you have, the first bilateral taking place between President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Both sides welcoming each other. The Prime Minister speaking about Ukraine and how he and President Putin have been in touch, and he spoke about a peaceful way forward. If you've just joined us, Kadamni, if you can take us through, what has happened so far, the statement, the comments made by President Putin welcoming Prime Minister Modi and his opening remarks.
Well, the first thing when Prime Minister Modi reached here, when he went to the Kazan Kremlin, which is where both the leaders are talking right now, and when he reached there, they shook hands and hugged each other. So that thing which would be talked about in the future, you would see people talking about it quite a lot, that hug as well. So from there, they went to the conference room. Both the delegations sat down at the table. President Putin spoke first. He thanked PM Modi for accepting his invitation for coming to BRICS, because this is also a strong messaging. Then he has said that there is a strong cooperation between India and Russia, and that is something which is very important. And he also looks forward cooperation in different fields. PM Modi also gave his opening remarks, where we saw how he said that we are very close, cooperating quite closely. But one remark which was watched very closely, which would be talked about, would be the one which he made about Ukraine, where he said that we have been in contact for several months now. We have been talking about this conflict, and we would like to see a peaceful resolution to this conflict, and India would do whatever it can so that this can come through. This is something which is very, very important, and it would be watched very closely. And we would also have to see what comes out of this bilateral, where this issue will also be discussed, as PM Modi has also said.
All right, thanks so much, Kadamni, for joining us. Kadamni, they're reporting from Kazan as that BRICS Summit is underway, and the first bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin.